Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. My name's Lara, adoptee, adoption wellbeing researcher, coach and psychotherapist. And today I'm talking to you about dates on the calendar, events, those sorts of days where you might think that it's all joyous, it's all good fun, but actually they can be very, very triggering. And it's kind of a continuation from my last video, which talked all about triggering language, which I will also link in the down below description so that if you haven't seen that one, you can take a look. So the idea behind loaded language, as I've said before, is that it's very one-sided, and actually it's the similar kind of thing with dates on the calendar. I mean, as an adoptee, there'll be specific dates on the calendar that are personal to us, to the adoptee that you know or who is in your family. But there'll also be kind of those dates that are common to everyone and that ordinarily might be celebrated by everyone. And when I say everyone, often that can be worldwide or on a more national level or within the household. But we also have dates that are significant in our lives on an individual level. And so it kind of looks at how all of those days of the year, if you like, the dates on the calendar can become extremely triggering and upsetting for an adoptee. And just as I always do, I like to give a little bit of context. And as an existential therapist, by the way, this is not something that is just limited to adoptees. Of course it's not. This happens for all of us. Those of us who have lost a loved one, when that date comes around on the calendar, it can be very triggering, it can be very upsetting, and it can flood us with memories and feelings that are felt on a very, very visceral level. As I say, as a therapist, I support people through that, but as an existential therapist, I would look at the meaning behind that. I'm looking at what the significance is of that. And so when we look at language to avoid, then it's the meaning that would be derived from that, from the individual's perspective, the adoptee's perspective, and likewise with the dates and the calendar events and that kind of a thing. So it's about meaning. And in fact, all of us look for meaning. We all like to find meaning. It's not even a conscious process that we do. But if you are looking at a particular calendar date or event, anniversary in one way, the point of this is that you don't necessarily assume that the adoptee in your life is looking at that in the exact same way. So it's a really important thing to bear in mind. So obviously a very good example of that is their birthday. Now, many people like to celebrate birthdays and make a fuss around people's birthdays, and of course that's a nice thing. In theory, that's a nice thing to do, and you make a party, you might make a cake, you might invite people around, you might celebrate. But just think about how that birthday is affecting that person. The meaning that's behind that for the person is that was the day that their own biological parent, their own mother, gave birth to them. And for many, the last time, depending on their circumstances, the last time that they actually saw them. For others of us, for me, that was several days later. And so that brings me on to this expression, which came back in my little survey that I did recently about language that's very triggering. And this expression and celebration of Gotcha Day, my understanding of that is that the adoptive family, the day that they collect their child, for some has become known as Gotcha Day. And that's very loaded. So I hadn't actually heard of that previously. I feel that, perhaps for some of our friends in North America, that's quite a big thing. It also probably exists here in the UK. I luckily hadn't heard of that. But, looking at it from the perspective of the adoptive parents, I understand that it's a long journey going through that whole process about, being assessed and the ups and downs, the rollercoaster that is the journey to adopting, which then obviously would culminate for you in the day that you get that child, and for you theoretically very likely to be a day worth celebrating. But for me personally, and I can only speak for myself, as I say, I hadn't heard that expression, but if I look at that through the lens of what the adoptee is experiencing, the day that my adoption was formally signed off, that happened when I was 9 days old. So that would be the gotcha day. And actually, every year on that 9th day, I have had the thought that that was the last time that I was with my biological mother. And so that's a very triggering thought. Since then, I'm very lucky that actually, and this is a very interesting irony, but since then I actually have my first child was born on that 9th day after my birthday. And so that date has now become synonymous with something much more worthy of celebration in my life. But if you can understand the two different perspectives, then I think it will become quite clear. So for the adoptive parents, that is a day for celebration. For the adoptee, no matter how stable their upbringing, no matter how much love they've received, for the adoptee, the day that they were taken away from their biological parent, their biological mother, is a day of mourning. And so be very careful around the gotcha day celebrations, and be very careful around that kind of language. And I would just invite you to enter into the world of your adoptee and what might be going on for them on that day. And as with all the videos that I've done, there is that sort of strand through them all that emphasises the need for communication. So put your own celebrations maybe to one side for a minute and invite them to express to you what that feels like for them. Ask them to tell you what it feels like on that day. As I say, I've only just touched on my own birthday or your adoptee's birthday and the day that they were taken officially and legally away from the adoptive parent. And both of those are quite triggering in very different ways. So not always something to be universally celebrated, but the meaning that's derived from each of those events is very different for, say, me or other adoptees versus the adoptive parents that took us in. So it's that kind of duality, it's that kind of looking at it, inviting them to express their meaning, inviting them to express their feelings and their experiences through those events. And there are plenty more like that, obviously. Christmas, with how loaded Christmas is, with all the connotations of Christmas and expectations around Christmas, and especially because the word family, and actually that was another quite triggering word for some, not for everyone, but it was quite a triggering word. So the connotations of Christmas and family, so all those sorts of events. And then there's those that you may not even have given any other thought to, such as, if it's known, the birth date of either parent, the death date of one or more of the parents. And I say that because that's my own experience. So as an adoptee discovers their own life story, their own meaning, then there are more and more dates on their calendar that could potentially be fairly triggering. So it's being mindful of that. It's having the ability to mentalize that. It's speaking with them from a position of curiosity, compassion and love, and just putting your own feelings and your own, let's say, happiness or celebrations just to one side for a moment, and, as I say, inviting them to join you in open communication about what that means for them. If you could provide a space where their feelings are considered, are met with compassion and understanding, then it's unlikely to turn into a problem. It's where very much the self, the ego self, if we call it, not to say that you've got or anyone has a big ego, although they might, but that's not what I'm talking about. It's the sort of the focus on the self first and foremost, which is largely how we are by design, but it takes the need to step out of that truth and step out of your own truth and your own meaning and your own reality and try and step into theirs. And that's what all of these videos really are emphasizing, that the need for adoptive parents or anybody who has a relationship with an adoptee actually to step into their truth and their reality. And I think the thing about the loss and the trauma that's so difficult is that very often it's shrouded in mystery, it's shrouded in secrecy, it's kind of enveloped by a sense of guilt on the part of the adoptee, and so it's very difficult to process feelings. It's very difficult to feel like it's okay to talk about these things ordinarily. So you play a very important role in stepping into that conversation with them, receiving what they have to say through those sort of compassionate eyes and meeting them in that conversation in a way that's going to make them feel loved and accepted. And in the end, that's all that we all look for is acceptance and understanding. For all relationships not to be just about the one party, but for both parties to kind of understand the role of the other and the meaning that might be derived within the relationship of the other. So yeah, births, deaths, marriages, birthdays, anniversaries, Christmas, New Year, there's so many, and all I would say is just don't assume that because you think it's a day for celebration that your adoptee also feels that way. So, as always, mentalize their situation, open up the conversation. You start those conversations, don't wait for them to. You might say, well, I'm open to talking about those things. I'll wait for them to come to me. No, don't, because it's very tough as an adoptee to bring these types of conversations to the family in a way that feels that you can feel confident and open with them enough to do that. So it is kind of on the adult or the sort of the adoptive parent to and the siblings. Actually, the research found the siblings is important in that as well. Open that conversation up, bring it up around the table, bring it up, make it healthy. So mentalize, put yourself in their shoes, ask them what it feels like, lots of conversation around that. Above all, don't assume, and meet it with compassion and understanding and acceptance. As always, these videos are made so that adoptees stand a reasonable chance of achieving well-being. As you know, my research discovered that adoptees don't fare quite as well as the general population in terms of achieving well-being, and well-being is super important, as I talk about in my research and in my writings on the subject, so I'll link that down below as well. Well-being is very, very important. The World Health Organization talks about it. Here in the UK, the Office for National Statistics measures it. The country operates better when people have higher levels of well-being. There's less suicide, relationships do better, society functions better when people feel higher levels of well-being, and my purpose is to ensure that the adoptee demographic is not excluded from that. And so these are the conversations that will help that to happen. Thank you for listening. I hope you find it helpful. I hope you find it useful. Tell your friends, tell your colleagues, and I'm very grateful for your support. Please like, subscribe, and hit the bell if you want to hear all about the new released videos as they come out. All right, thank you for your time.